Good afternoon, Your Excellencies Lyudmila Georgievna Vorobieva as the Ambassador of Russian Federation. Good afternoon, distinguished Professor Semiarto Aji Purwanto, PhD, as the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences of University of Indonesia. To the distinguished Mrs. Asra Virjanita, PhD, as the Head of International Relations Department of FISIP UI, esteemed lecturers, alumni, and international relations students of FISIP UI. It is my pleasure to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, to the Studium Generale, which brings the theme of Russia, Indonesia, and the Indo-Pacific. This event today is held by the International Relations Department of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, University of Indonesia. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am Adelia, an undergraduate international relations student at the University of Indonesia, and I will be the master of ceremony for our Studium Generale today. The Studium Generale will be accessible not only from the Zoom meeting, but also from the live streaming feature in YouTube through the International Relations Department's YouTube channel. Before we proceed to the main session of our event today, there are several general rules that the participant could adhere to. First of all, is that all participants are expected to turn on their camera using the designated background that has been provided, as well as ensure that their microphone is muted. Second of all, question and answer session will be led by the moderator, where the selected participant may ask their question through the Zoom meeting and or the live question feature in YouTube. Third, if any serious technical issue occurs, the event will be redirected to the live streaming feature in YouTube through the International Relations Department's YouTube channel. Last but not least, we assure you that we will try to accommodate as many questions as possible. Without further ado, we will commence our Studium Generale today with an opening and welcome remarks from the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences of University of Indonesia. To Professor Semiarto Aji Purwanto, you may have the floor.
Your Excellency, Madam Ambassador, distinguished guests, honorable lecturer of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, especially of the Department of International Relations, dear students, college, and all participants, a very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank God that we are all in the good health, so we can gather today virtually to welcome the Ambassador of the Russian Federation to Indonesia, Her Excellency Madam Ambassador Lyudmila Vorobieva. Her Excellency will give a public lecture on Russia, Asean, and the Indo-Pacific. From the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, we are sending our warm greetings to Mrs. Ambassador. For your information, this faculty is one of the most reputable centers of education in social and political sciences in Indonesia, including in the study of international relations. And despite we are all still undergoing difficulties due to the COVID-19 pandemic, so the event has to be held virtually. I hope this does not reduce the enthusiasm to talk and discuss about what Russia's foreign policies has to offer in Asia, which affect many countries in the region, including to Indonesia. Russia and Indonesia opened diplomatic relations back in 1950. And in the early years of our bilateral relationship, there were several warm and sweet moments, ranging from the personal friendship between our President Sukarno and the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev to concrete works in our national development at the time. And some time ago, I visited Palangkaraya, the capital city of Central Kalimantan, that used to be planned by Sukarno to be the future of Indonesia's capital cities. There is a main road there that was built under cooperation with the Soviet assistance in financial and technical matters. The road is still there in a very good condition, and it became one of the best monuments for the Soviet and Indonesia relationship. And after political changes in both countries during the 90s, Russia and Indonesia have pledged to continue mutually beneficial cooperation. We conduct some regular state visits, security cooperation, as well as support for Indonesia's foreign policies initiative in Asia. And both Russia and Indonesia are members of various international organizations, such as G20s, which is currently under Indonesian presidency. And in addition, it's also we are also a member of East Asia Summit and the Asean Regional Forum. It is important to note that it was also under Indonesian chairmanship when Russia was admitted to the East Asia Summit. And in addition to the political cooperation between Indonesia and Russia, last year on March 2021, a bronze statue of Yuri Gagarin, the first Soviet cosmonaut, was inaugurated in one of city garden in South Jakarta by the governor of Jakarta as a symbol of friendship between the two countries. In the complicated geopolitical environment with uncertainties caused by some issues such as COVID-19 pandemic, growing rivalry among some big countries, and economic disruption, it is important for Indonesia, with its independent and active foreign policy, to look forward for cooperation with other major powers. And the Russian Federation, with holds strong global influence and significance, especially with its important role as the countries having a permanent seat in the UN Security Council, is no exception. We are all in the need of having a good relationship. There are some challenging situations ahead, but as a Russian quote says, walking with a friend in the dark is better than walking alone in the light. And I think friendship and cooperation will always be a good thing to reach out together. Lastly, I would like again to quote one of the famous Russian writer, Leo Tolstoy, who once said that the most powerful warriors are patience and time. Therefore, I hope that the participants of this lecture can use the time given for good and useful discussion for the benefit of Indonesia and Russian cooperation in the future. Thank you very much for your attention. Terima kasih and spasibo. I hand it to the floor.
Thank you, Professor. As an expression of gratitude for Her Excellency's presence in our Studium Generale today, a token of appreciation will be given by Professor Semiarto Aji Purwanto as the faculty's dean. To you, Professor.
Okay, here's the token of appreciation from our Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, given to Her Excellency Lyudmila Georgievna Vorobieva, who is kindly become a speaker on the STUDIUM Generale of Russia, Indonesia, and Indo-Pacific today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Moving on, we will now have a photo session. So to all participants present today, please turn on your camera and give us your best pose. The documentation process will be guided by the committee.
Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, distinguished guests, please, if it is possible, turn on your camera because we are going to take picture together. Okay, for the first slide, 1, 2, 3. Okay, there are 5 slides, so hold your smile. Second slide, 1, 2, 3. For all of our students, if it is possible to open your camera, please do so. For the third slides, 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the fourth slide, 1, 2, 3, and the last slide, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Adele, you may continue.
Okay, thank you to the committee. Now I will invite our moderator who will lead the main discussion session today, Mr. Ristian Atriani, or also colloquially known as Mas Ristian, who is one of the lecturers in the International Relations Department of the University of Indonesia, specializing in international security issues. So to Mas Ristian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Adele. Your Excellency, Dobedian, Здравствуйте. Good afternoon, Pak Dekan, and all who attend this virtual Studium General virtually. We are fortunate and honored to have as our speaker today, Her Excellency, the Russian Ambassador to Indonesia, Mrs. Lyudmila Vorobieva. Before taking up her post as the Russian Ambassador in Indonesia, Mrs. Vorobieva took over a number of key positions in the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including a Director General in the 3rd ASEAN Department, as well as the Ambassador of the Russian Federation in Malaysia. Her Excellency will talk about a topic of utmost relevance to scholars of international relations, that is Russia, Indonesia, and the Indo-Pacific. Your Excellency, as the Dean has explained earlier, Russia's relations with Indonesia and ASEAN in general are growing in strength from time to time. Last December, we witnessed the first Russia-ASEAN naval exercise and the visit to Indonesia by the National Security Advisor, Nikolai Patrushev. These events suggest a greater role and engagement Russia seeks to find in the Indo-Pacific. As we know, the Indo-Pacific is a region where many great powers meet and compete. As an ASEAN dialogue partner, Russia is, of course, without doubt, an indispensable player. So we look forward to what Your Excellency has to say about some of the regional issues, including the escalation of Sino-US rivalry, the South China Sea disputes, and of course, how Russia observes Indonesia's relationship with Western powers, not least with America, that has recently reached a new milestone with the visit of State Secretary Blinken to Jakarta. Without further ado, I pass the floor to the Ambassador. Your Excellency, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you so very much, Professor Padin. You indeed gave a very good review of our relations, our bilateral relations in the past. Good afternoon to everyone, to all the participants. Selamat sore, or Здравствуйте, as we say in Russian. Indeed, it is an honor and pleasure for me to participate in this very important event in one of the leading Indonesian universities, and to share our views on what is happening in the Russian-Indonesian relations and in the Asia-Pacific. I would like to say at once that in Russia, we don't like the name of Indo-Pacific, and I will explain why a little bit later. Well, what is wrong? Actually, what is wrong with Asia-Pacific? You know, why Asia has been dropped out of this concept. I would like to maybe divide my presentation in two parts. One will be about what is happening now in our bilateral relation and how we see them. And the second part will be dedicated on our views on what is happening in the Asia-Pacific. And if you're interested, maybe not only in the Asia-Pacific, but in Europe as well. But I think we have a question and answer session. If you're interested, I will be happy to answer your question and maybe explain to you the Russian position on all these tensions that have been created in Europe in the past few months by our Western partners and friends. As Professor mentioned, our relation have a long history, actually even long before we established our diplomatic relations in 1950. There were ties between Russia and Indonesia. Maybe the Russian studies students, they know that the first mentioning of Indonesia in Russian literature goes as far back as the 11th century. And after that, many travelers have visited from Russia, have visited this part of the world and always referred to the beautiful islands which are now known in the world as Indonesia. Even the members of our royal family visited Batavia. For instance, our last emperor, Nicholas II, at that time he was crown prince in 1892, if I'm not mistaken. He visited Batavia, and also he went to Bogor and was very impressed by the warm welcome given him by Indonesian people. Our formal diplomatic relations have been established on February 3 in 1950, and as Professor mentioned, indeed, there were a very high level of cooperation between our country and Indonesia at that time. President Sukarno visited Soviet Union at that time 4 times. And the song Rayuan Pulau Kelapa became very well known in Russia. It was translated into Russian language because before President Sukarno came to our country in 1959, a documentary was made on Indonesia, and the soundtrack for this documentary was the song Rayuan Pulau Kelapa. So it became immensely popular in Russia. Among the older generation, when my father found out that I was going to be posted in Indonesia, the first thing he did, he sang this song to me in Russian. And not only a road in Kalimantan that Professor mentioned was built, we also built the Gelora Bung Karno Stadium, the hospital Persahabatan, and some other buildings in Jakarta. When I visited the hospital Persahabatan, the doctors and the staff of the hospital told me that there's some equipment that is still working from the 60s, Russian-made, like an elevator or a washing machine. And they still can be used. So these are the symbols of the friendship that we used to have and that I hope we do have right now. In Russia, we see Indonesia as our key partner in Southeast Asia and Asia-Pacific as a whole. Indeed, Indonesia is a leading country among ASEAN countries, and Russia has established in 2018 a strategic partnership with ASEAN. We've been dialogue partners with ASEAN for 25 years, and our cooperation with ASEAN is developing in a very positive way. Indonesia is the country with the largest Muslim population, and as President Putin said while inaugurated Cathedral Mosque in Moscow in 2016, that in a sense, Russia is a Muslim country as well, because we have around 15% of our population are Muslims, and they are not migrants. Well, we do have migrants, of course, but most of the Muslim population Russian are people who lived in Russia for centuries, because Islam came to Russia even long before it came to Southeast Asia or Indonesia. And of course, we do appreciate the very active and independent character of the foreign policy of Indonesia, and we share many similar views with our Indonesian partners on what is happening in Asia-Pacific and in the world as a whole. And the testimony of that was our joint work in the Security Council when Indonesia was the non-permanent member of the Security Council, and we supported each other's initiative. One of the very good examples of our cooperation when together we prevented the snapback of sanctions against Iran that were initiated by the United States. By our joint effort, we didn't make it happen. If we look at the latest development in our relations, we can see also very positive signs and trends. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, COVID-19 pandemic made it influence on how our relations are developing, but still, if we look at the political contacts between our leaders and our foreign ministers. Last year in July, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, visited Jakarta, and he met with the President of the Republic of Indonesia, Pak Joko Widodo, and had very comprehensive talks with the Foreign Minister, Ibu Retno Marsudi. As you mentioned, in December 2021, there was a big inter-agency delegation led by Secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, Mr. Nikolai Patrushev, arrived in Jakarta, and they were a very good meeting with Coordinating Minister for Political, Legal and Security Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, Pak Muhammad Mahfud. Actually, it's not a new development. This is a regular consultation mechanism that we have among Russia and Indonesia, and this was the 6th meeting already of this mechanism. It wasn't held for 2 years because of the COVID, but previously Pa Wiranto, who held the position before Pa Mahfud, visited Moscow and had this kind of consultation on security issues, and I would say a very wide array of security issues, beginning from domestic security issues in both countries to international issues that are of concern for both sides. We do support the priorities of Indonesia as the chair of the G20, and in December, the Russian G20 Sherpa, Mrs. Svetlana Lukash, participated in the first Sherpas meeting organized by the Indonesian presidency in Jakarta. Despite the pandemic, we also had contacts between the parliaments of our two countries. We're very grateful that observers from Indonesia, from the parliament of Indonesia, visited Russia in September last year, where we were having our parliamentary elections. If you talk about economic relations and trade, also despite the COVID, they are on the rise. By our estimate last year, our bilateral trade reached $3 billion in 2021. And of course, we haven't yet reached the target of 5 billion annual trade set out by our presidents in 2016, when President Widodo visited Russia and participated in the Russia-ASEAN summit in Sochi. But if the trend continues, and last year we've seen increase of our trade volume by 40%, we will reach that target quite soon. And I would also like to note that Indonesia enjoys a large trade surplus with Russia. And in a sense, it's a testimony of the very good conditions for conducting business that Russian government gives to Indonesia. Russian export to Indonesia is dominated by fertilizers, metals, oil and gas, while from Indonesia we import a lot of palm oil, and we are increasing the volumes. We don't have any restrictions on that, unlike the European Union. As I mentioned, nevertheless, it's obvious that this volume does not correspond to the potential of both countries, especially if we look at our joint population of more than 400 million people, and our great natural and human resources, as well as mutual interest of businesses in Russia and Indonesia. In our view, the most promising areas of cooperation would be energy, including nuclear energy, oil, gas, mining industry, transportation, infrastructure, aircraft and shipbuilding, IT, agriculture. You can name a lot of areas. If we look at investment, well, unfortunately, it's not that large, but we have some big Russian companies that came to Indonesia. For instance, now oil and gas company Rosneft and Zarubezhneft from Russia are successfully working on upstream and downstream projects in East Java province and the Natuna Sea. And certainly you've seen the online taxi service Maxim. Wherever I go to Indonesia, and I just returned back from Kendari, Sulawesi, I've seen a lot of taxi Maxims operating there, and maybe you will be surprised that this online service is operated by a Russian company. So it is a total success story in Indonesia. In more than 60 cities, you can see taxi Maxim. So when you see Maxim, you must remember that they're from Russia. Well, they're run by a Russian company. Of course, pandemic has become a social and economical scourge for both states. However, it opens new opportunities for interaction. As I told you, in August 2021, the Russian vaccine Sputnik V was authorized for emergency use in Indonesia, and hopefully one day it will be delivered here. If you are interested in this subject, maybe during the Q&A session, I can tell you more about Sputnik. If we look in cooperation in humanitarian areas, including students' exchanges, we now have around 700 Indonesian students studying in Russia, and we're giving government scholarships to Indonesian. We've increased the number of scholarships by 100 this academic year, so it will be 261 students that could be able to go to Russia for studies. Because of the limitation of the time, I will not talk more about Russian-Indonesian relations, but as you see, they're on the rise. And of course, we're looking forward to the visit of the President of the Russian Federation to Jakarta, probably for the G20 summit that will take place in November in Bali. It should have happened much earlier when we were celebrating the 70th anniversary of our bilateral relation, but because of the COVID, it was not possible. Still, we do hope that our president will visit Indonesia again. As for the Indo-Pacific subject, we are well aware of the Indonesian concept of the Indo-Pacific, which actually laid the foundation for the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific. In the joint statement of the 4th ASEAN-Russia summit, the Russian side acknowledged the importance of the principles and objectives in the ASEAN outlook, which are inclusive in nature and aim to guide cooperation in the Asia-Pacific and Indian Ocean regions. We believe that cooperation based on these principles can generate momentum for building strategic trust and strengthen existing ASEAN-led mechanism, while not creating new mechanism or replacing existing one. We do strongly support ASEAN centrality, and the first in history Russian ASEAN Navy exercises that have been mentioned here, which took place early December last year in Belawan near Medan, actually is a testimony of our commitment to ASEAN centrality. These exercises were not oriented against any third party. They were purely defensive in nature, and we are very grateful to Indonesia that really facilitated this event and hosted this event in its territorial waters. But having said that, we support the ASEAN Indo-Pacific outlook. I would note that we're very concerned with the outgoing attempts of Western countries to actually substitute the content of the ASEAN Indo-Pacific outlook with their own Indo-Pacific concepts that are of the same name, but are very different in nature or essence. The authors of these concepts ignore existing mechanisms of multilateral regional dialogue, as well as the traditions of openness, inclusiveness, and transparency. It's an open secret that Western concepts, Indo-Pacific concepts, are not inclusive. They're actually exclusive, and aimed at containing of their geopolitical and economic rivals, China and Russia. The obvious proof of this is their refusal to coordinate with Moscow on Indo-Pacific issues. Though we are open for discussions and dialogue, we've stated that many times. Russian Federation is an integral part of Asia-Pacific. 2/3 of our territory is in Asia. And we cannot support any alliances in this region that are aimed at unilateral dominance and gaining ungrounded economic preferences, and of course, replacement of international law with rules-based order. You know, many people asked us why we don't support this rules-based order. It sounds well, doesn't it? Order, rules. But if you analyze the essence of this notion, it is clear that it's a substitution for international law. We have rules already in our international global system of relations, and these are norms of international law and UN Charter. Why do we need to have another set of rules? And the main question is, who will set the rules? Will it be Russia? No. Will it be Indonesia? No. So why do we need to follow the rules that would be established by a third party without any consideration of the interest and concerns of say, Russia or Indonesia? So why do we need this rules-based order? Of course, and we can see how our Western partners are trying to create a number of exclusive format. Now we have a name for that. It's not multilateralism, it's minilateralism in the Asia-Pacific under the Indonesia-Pacific RAN. And we think it's a very dangerous trend. We are analyzing the possible outcomes of the Quad and the AUKUS establishment and see them as a feasible threat to the regional stability and security, ASEAN centrality, and a non-proliferation regime. If we look at AUKUS, would Indonesia be happy to have a nuclear submarine just in the neighborhood? How can the appearance of nuclear submarines in this region contribute to maintaining peace, stability, and security? I think it's quite the opposite. It will just enhance, it will just boost the arms race in the region. No one will feel more secure, and we see that the official reaction of Indonesia was actually quite strong and directed against the establishment of such exclusive mechanism. On the other hand, Russia is promoting the concept of inclusive security. That means if you want to ensure your own security, you shouldn't threaten the security of other countries. All countries, be it small or big, have the right for their security be ensured and their interests be respected. We strongly oppose these new dividing lines and narrow blocks in Asia. In 2015, the president of the Russian Federation put forward the initiative of the Great Eurasian Partnership. It implies creation of a common, open, and non-discriminatory economic partnership between ASEAN, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Eurasian Economic Union, with the view to ensure that integration processes in Asia-Pacific and Eurasia are complementary. In this regard, also for your information, Russia, as one of the Eurasian Economic Union economist states, and the Eurasian Economic Union actually includes Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan. We are facilitating the establishment of stronger contacts between Eurasian Economic Union and Indonesia in a view to have a free trade zone between Eurasian Economic Union and Indonesia. Being part of Eurasian Economic Union, we cannot have a free trade zone on a bilateral basis with Indonesia. So we need to have a consensus among the 5 countries and Indonesia to have this free trade zone. But in October 2019, a memorandum on cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Commission, which is the governing body of the Union, and the government of Indonesia was signed. And now a joint working group is studying the possibility of the free trade agreement between Indonesia and the Union. And the results are to come out quite soon. You've been mentioning, a number of, you've been asking me to comment on the relations of Indonesia and other countries. I wouldn't do that, because we respect the foreign policy of Indonesia, the independent approach that you have. I'm not in position on commenting on that. On the South China Sea issues, I can tell you that we are strategic partners with China. Russian Federation and China's relations have never been so strong. If you look at the history, we are on the highest point of our relations right now. Maybe you followed the recent visit of President Putin to Beijing, where he also attended the opening of the Olympic Games, and he had a very substantial meeting with President Xi Jinping. And I strongly recommend that you read the joint statement issued by the two leaders. And in that statement, you will find that our approaches and our positions between Russia and China on the issues of security, both in the Asia-Pacific and Europe, are quite similar. And actually, China supported our position on the security guarantees for Russia in Europe. So our trade with China has reached 134 billion US dollars, and it's growing. We have contacts at all levels. We are not a military bloc. We are not a political union, but in a sense, our relations are even more than the military or defense blocs that we've seen during Cold War, and that is stated in this. That is written in this statement, and it's definitely true. ASEAN countries are also our strategic partners. We are a strategic partner with ASEAN as an organization. We are strategic partners with Vietnam. Hopefully, we will sign a declaration on strategic partnership with Indonesia if and when our president comes to Jakarta. So our position is that all the differences that you have concerning the South China Sea should be solved by way of consultations and dialogue. And we know that this kind of consultations are going on, and we really would like to see the solution of this issues by way of signing a document, a code of conduct in South China Sea. On the question of rivalry between the China and US, China and Russia in the world, well, I can talk for another hour on that issue, but you know, to put it in simple words, the world is changing. The world dominated by just one superpower is coming to an end. This period in human history, it is evident because we see new centers of power emerging. Of course, it is China. Of course, it is ASEAN, including Indonesia. It is Russia. It is Brazil. It is South Africa. It is other countries in Latin America. But the Western powers who have dominated the world for more than 500 years, they are not ready to accept it. And that's the main problem. If you ask me why our Western partners always blame us for everything that happens in the world, why we're always the bad guys, I will tell you that we're defying the Western dominance. We don't want to accept it because we are of the view that just one country or a small group of countries cannot tell the whole world what to do, cannot give orders to the whole world. We don't want war. You know, we've learned our lessons during World War II. We lost 27 million people in that terrible war. And Russia will be the last of the countries in the world who would like to have a new military conflict. But we want the West to talk to us as their equals and to respect our interests and our security concerns. So the West is under illusion that they can continue to dominate the world and use the force to ensure their dominance. It's not possible anymore, but it's very dangerous, of course. From our part, we will do whatever we can to prevent any major military conflict or war of happening. We're always of the view that dialogue and consultations are better than any conflict. But we have our red lines, and we've told our Western partners about them. If it's interesting to you, maybe during the Q&A question, I can tell more about that. So the main reason for this rivalry is that the West doesn't want to give it positions of dominance in the world. These people have been, Indonesia is very much aware what happened during the colonial times when the Western powers were just pumping out national resources and for their own prosperity from their colonial regions and countries that they're colonized. And they're still under the illusion that they can continue living in this way, but it cannot be anymore. So the world has changed and we have to accept these changes. Well, on that, I think I will stop and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Spasiba Van Balshoy, Your Excellency. We do have a long list of questions from the audience already. Perhaps for the first question, I would like to invite Jonathan Jordan, teaching assistant with our department. Perhaps he would like to raise his question in person. Jonathan, please.
Добрый день, уважаемая господа посол.
Добрый день.
Я несколько раз встретился с господой Воробьевой во время пролета и очень рад, чтобы может участвовать в лекции. И сейчас у меня есть вопрос, но я буду задавать мои вопросы на индонезийском, потому что или на английском, чтобы ее может понять.
На английском, если можно.
So I stated that I would deliver my question in English so everyone can understand. Actually, the question is already stated in the chat box. About a few years ago, Indonesia and Russia started to find a deal on the purchase of Sukhoi Su-35 Su-3 but unfortunately it fell through in midst of threats of sanctions from the West, Qatar, and also some issues regarding payment, despite it was stated that the issue of payment was already stated. But after this development, how does this affect Russia's stance on arms sales to Indonesia in the future? Are there still new projects and new plans for aircraft purchases from Russia by Indonesia? Because Russia has a very good quality in aircraft machinery, so therefore I hope the cooperation in purchasing aircraft will be continued in the future. Я тоже хотел бы поздравить российских спортсменов во время Олимпиады в Пекине, например, Лесник Болшунов, золотой призер игр, и Камила Валиева, фигуристка, и также сборная России по хоккею. Я надеюсь на больших результатах. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо. Well, on the Sukhoi 35 deal, the deal was signed in 2018, and unfortunately, there is no much progress on this issue. Though the government of Indonesia has not rejected it. It's not over official. As we understand, there is a lot of pressure from third parties on the government of Indonesia. We still hope that it will go through. Of course, Indonesia is a very important partner in terms of defense procurement. For Russia, we are proposing many kinds of equipment to Indonesia, because we, as you know, we are a major producer of defense equipment, and whatever Indonesia needs, we can provide. There were more proposals on outside the Sukhoi 35 deal for equipment. Some of the equipment has been purchased by the Indonesian armed forces, maybe in not a very big way, but still. And we've also submitted more proposals. But I would like to say the defense cooperation between Russia and Indonesia, it's much more than just procurement of defense equipment. For instance, the Navy exercises, Russia, ASEAN, that's one of the example of the defense cooperation. Also, there was a number of port calls by Navy ships from Russia to Indonesia. Indonesian students study in the military universities and schools in Russia, and we hope that more of Indonesian military people will come to study to Russia. There are contacts between our Ministry of Defense, our armed forces. So our defense cooperation is much more than just the Sukhoi 35 deal, but we still don't lose hope that it will come through. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We have another question from one of our lecturers, Ira. She asked that Your Excellency has mentioned that Russia is suggesting the concept of inclusive security in Asia-Pacific. How does Russia plan to implement this concept? And given the current great power competition in Asia-Pacific, will this concept bring a new external power actors to the region that will affect the complexity of the power dynamics? Thank you.
Yes, we've been promoting this inclusive security concept for already quite some time, especially on the platform of the East Asian summits. There are a consultation process going on. There's a working group on security architecture in the region, and in the framework of this working group, we're promoting this concept. Actually, we've been talking about the necessity of an inclusive security long before the Indo-Pacific concept came out. And it actually proved how right we were, because our Western partners are trying to do the opposite, actually, to create divisive lines, to enhance this rivalry in the Asia-Pacific. And as I told you, we see it as a very dangerous trend, creating tensions, divisions, provoking the arms race in the region, making countries divert their resources to buy defense equipment or to produce defense equipment instead of actually using these resources to develop economy, human resources, etc., etc. So, but the only reason for that, the Western countries don't see any other way of preserving their dominance. That's just the use of force. And as you know, the logo of the British Empire was divide and rule. If countries are divided, it's very easy to manipulate and to rule. If countries are united, it's much more difficult to manipulate and to promote your own interest at the detriment of other. we have a universal body. We have the United Nations, which was created actually after World War II, when international communities saw the need of this kind of mechanism that will represent the interest of all countries. And now we're seeing efforts to undermine this mechanism. We think that we need to enhance the role of the United Nations. We need, in Asia-Pacific, we see ASEAN as an anchor of stability and security. That's why we are always ensuring ASEAN centrality. We don't want to see structures that would undermine ASEAN centrality in this region. So this notion of inclusive security, I think it can be, well, we think that it can be applied not only in Asia-Pacific, but in other regions in the world, including Europe, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. The next question comes from one of our students, Saka Panulu. His question is about Russia and ASEAN relation. What is the stance of the Russian Federation on the current Myanmar political crisis? Is the bilateral engagement with the Myanmar military authority reflect the Russian acknowledgement of the regime? And his second question is that given the fact that Russia is one of ASEAN dialogue partners, is there any strategic plan to engage with ASEAN to resolve political and humanitarian crisis in Myanmar? So there are two interrelated questions on Myanmar and Russia's approach to it. Thank you.
Well, unlike our European and American friends, we're not interfering into domestic affairs of other countries. So we, first of all, we think that excessive interference in the domestic affairs of Myanmar from various parties will not lead to any constructive solution. We support the efforts by ASEAN, and we think that ASEAN is the perfect platform to discuss this kind of situations. Of course, we know about the five points consensus by ASEAN and all the efforts made by the association to solve this issue. We have an embassy, we have diplomatic relations with Myanmar, you know, like Indonesia has, like all the countries basically have. We have an embassy in Myanmar. Of course, we do engage with the government of Myanmar, but we do not interfere. We support ASEAN efforts, and we hope that this issue also can be resolved by means of dialogue and consultations. Again, sanctions, excessive pressure will not lead to anything. You know, the only actually body that can apply sanction and is mandated by the international community is the Security Council. Any unilateral sanctions are illegitimate. You know, we suffered more than 70 rounds of Russia sanctions against us. So anything happens in the world, we are under another round of sanctions. And if you remember Barack Obama, when he was president, he said that because of the sanctions, the Russian economy will be in shreds. It never happened. We survived. Actually, last year, we experienced 4% growth of our economy despite the COVID situation and the sanctions, which is quite good for a European or Eurasian country. And we are against this kind of pressure. First, it will not lead to anything. Secondly, it will make people suffer. But there will be no positive result. So just dialogue and joint ASEAN efforts, and we do support. And it was stated by our Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Hendra Manurung, who will ask about the South China Sea again. He would like to seek your more elaborate views on the dispute there and how it implicates on Sino-American relations. And
Yeah.
Hendra is actually with us, so he would ask his question in person.
Большое спасибо, Mas Christian. So that здравствуйте,
Пожалуйста.
Госпожа посла Lyudmila. Рад вас видеть.
Я тоже. Спасибо.
Да, я тоже выпускник из Санкт-Петербургского государственного университета.
Хорошо.
Это уже давно, посла. Но, да, у меня есть вопросы, которые есть какое отношение будет между Россией и Индонезией. Мы знаем, чтобы Indonesia does not have any tidak punya posisi yang jelas. I mean that regarding to the just you mentioned before that касается стоит такой геополитические и тоже политико-экономические отношения с Китай и тоже США. Но вот только это у меня вопрос к послу, чтобы я тоже учиться много отношения между Индонезией и Россией, и тоже это как бы defense relations, and I do and also that I do support Russia position in the I don't know, but in the conflict I don't know that I told you that I also that follow the discussion. I mean that the press conference Vladimir Putin in front of the Izvestia TASS, I think that recently about 2 or 3 days ago regarding the problem itself on
Mas Hendra, could you please expedite your question, please?
Yes.
What is your question?
Already about yes, so much about the future of the Indonesia and Russia relation. Well, sorry, unity that I mentioned. Yeah, I mentioned about that in Russia, in Russian language. По-русскому языке. Большое спасибо, Mas Christian, also that Госпожа Lyudmila. Большое спасибо.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that the future of Russia-Indonesian relations are bright. As I mentioned, they are on the rise despite the COVID, and actually the basis of their relations that, of course, economic cooperation, but we can do much more in that. But as I told you, it's also going in there's a very positive trend. 40% of growth of trade it's a very good sign. And I can assure you that Russian businesses are looking more often towards Indonesia. Actually, in March, we were supposed to have a very big exposition in Jakarta, industrial and trade exposition from Russia in Aprom, but it didn't happen because of the COVID situation. Yeah, we are looking to have it sometime later this year, and that will, I hope, attract businesses both from Russia and Indonesia and help to establish direct links between our business people. Politically, we have no problems with Indonesia. We're good friends. We share similar views on what is happening in the world, in the region. We cooperate in the framework of different organizations and forums, especially the United Nations. We support each other's initiatives. We support each other candidatures. We need to know more about each other. It was mentioned that in the 60s we were very closed, and that people both in Russia knew a lot about Indonesia, and in Indonesia about Russia. Maybe our younger generation, they don't know as much, but that actually is the work of the diplomats to promote our own country, to make you know more about Russia. And your embassy in Moscow is doing a great job, Ambassador Jose Tavares. So I'm absolutely sure that our relations will develop in a very positive way. As I mentioned, we are expecting the visit of our president to Jakarta, and I'm sure it will, or maybe not to Jakarta, to Bali. It will give a boost to our bilateral relations, especially if we sign the declaration on strategic partnership. And we're working on quite a number of bilateral documents that can be signed, and they are covering a very large area of cooperation, including trade, economy, security, etc., etc. So, the people just tend to focus on Sukhoi 35 deal, but of course, Indonesia for us is much more than just a partner just a country that we're selling arms to. We see Indonesia as a partner and a friend, and I hope it's reciprocal. Thank you. Спасибо большое. Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. The next question is from Commodore Didong Rito Duta from the Indonesian Navy Sea Power Center. And he raised the issue, as you mentioned during the presentation, about the nuclear submarines of Western powers, including Australia. And so Didong, the person who asked the question, he said that he has emphasized in the Navy-to-Navy talk between the Indonesian Navy and the Russian Navy to have a nuclear-free agreement in ASEAN. He would like to ask how Russia's political attitude is with regards to Russia's own nuclear submarines and the potential of Russian nuclear submarines in Indonesia, which might not be consistent with the nuclear-free agreement in ASEAN. I assume this is the ASEAN Southeast Asia. I assume this is about the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon Free Zone Treaty. Ambassador. Yeah.
Well, we actually, we've been discussing with ASEAN for many years that the nuclear powers need to actually join this, the Bangkok Treaty. The talks have been going on. We do support the nuclear-free zone in ASEAN. I'm not aware that any Russian nuclear submarines ever were in the neighborhood of Indonesia, so I don't quite understand this question. It was, but of course we are concerned that AUKUS will be how AUKUS correspond with this. The concept of nuclear-free Southeast Asia. Of course, the members of AUKUS are saying that there will be no nuclear arms on the nuclear submarines. But I'm just giving my personal view. Why do you need nuclear submarines if you don't have no nuclear arms on them? So I think it would be just a matter of time, and of course that would be a threat to all the regional countries, especially to Indonesia, because Indonesia is in the neighborhood. It's not the official position of my government. It's my own thoughts. I'm no expert in nuclear submarines. Yeah, but of course, we are concerned how it also will correspond with the International Atomic Energy Agency requirements and the security guarantees if all this agreement will be between US, Australia and UK will be implemented, how the non-proliferation regime will be maintained. We're quite concerned, and we've voiced our concerns both to the agency and we don't quite understand how it all correlates, and we haven't been given answers yet. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Richard, one of our students. His question is on the portrayal of Russian threat by significant amount of media reporting. I presume this is the Western media that tries to extol on Russophobia. And his question is, how does Russia counter this Russophobe narrative?
Thank you for the question. Well, it's a very comprehensive question. First of all, the Russian threat. If you are referring to what is happening now in Russian-Ukrainian border and how the Western media are, being hysteric about the Russian threat, that all this every day you can read information or see on TV that Russia is going to invade Ukraine, that Russian troops are just going to invade Ukraine. But the funny thing that they are showing Russian troops on Russian territory and saying that it's a threat, while NATO is moving troops from 4,000 kilometers from their own borders, and now nobody's saying that it's aggression or a threat. So what is happening on the Russian-Ukrainian border? Nothing is happening there. We're not invading Ukraine. Why would we want to do that? Ukrainians are our brothers, actually. We're practically the same nation. I was born in Kiev. I'm not Ukrainian, but I was born in Ukraine. We all have relatives and friends in Ukraine. We have 3 million Ukrainians in Russia. How can we fight them? It's impossible. Even the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelensky, recently stated there is no sign of activities of Russian army that Russia is going to invade Ukraine. Yeah, why this is being done? I think it's to divert attention from what the West is doing, because they're just referring to the Russia-Ukrainian situation. But in fact, it's not about Russia and Ukraine. It's about the security guarantees for Russia. You know that we've presented to NATO and to the US our requests for guarantees. Why? I will explain you also in very simple words. If Ukraine becomes a NATO member, missiles, including nuclear missiles, would be placed at the borders of Russia. 3-5 minutes and they can reach Moscow. Could we be happy with that? Of course not. And it's not Russia that are placing missiles on the border of Canada or Mexico so that Washington can be reached in 3 to 5 minutes. No, it's NATO that is coming to our borders. They are bringing their arms, and including missiles, nuclear missiles, to our borders. Of course, we want security guarantees. We don't want that happen. And if you remember, when Soviet Union was Soviet Union has disintegrated, the West promised us that NATO will not expand. They never committed to their promises, and NATO expanded. But if Ukraine and Georgia are members of NATO. That will present a direct threat to security of the Russian Federation. And that's what we stated. We want our NATO partners and US to go back to the situation of 1997. That's what we told them. We're open for dialogue and consultations. We already had consultations with them on different levels. They gave some answers which we're not satisfied with, but still we want to continue this dialogue and consultations. But all this, this noise and hysteria about what is happening in on the Russian-Ukrainian border is just to divert the attention and to, to switch. To substitute the content of our concerns and our actually requests. Once again, we are concerned about our security. How can we not be when NATO slowly, NATO military, I don't want to use defense in this case, military infrastructure is coming closer and closer to our borders. Is Indonesia happy with AUKUS? No, because it's near your borders. We're not happy with NATO coming to our borders. Once again, we are not going to Mexico. We're not going to Canada. It's NATO and the US that are coming to our borders. So how to counter this Russian Russophobia in the Western media? It's not easy, of course, because basically all the media is controlled by the West, most of the media. So and even if we have our own media, Russia Today, it has been banned in many European countries. Now the latest one is in Germany, because the governments don't want this alternative view and information reach the audience. So our TV channels, our information agencies, they're just banned. Different pretexts. They're not paying this, they're not paying for the rental, they're not paying something else. But in fact, it's just the attempts to prevent people from knowing our position. We're very actually happy that Indonesian media, of course, they publish information provided by our information agency together with the Western ones, trying to have neutral and objective positions, but basically it's very difficult for us to reach the audience because the media are controlled by the government, by the Western governments. Yeah, that's the problem. So I hope I reached to you, so you can hear our position on and what is happening. Once again, we don't have any intention to start war. We don't want it. We are the last country that would like to be in a state of war, especially with Ukrainians, which are our brothers, sisters, relatives. We speak probably the same language. We're so close in culture and history. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Perhaps just to conclude our discussion, we have one statement from one of our faculty members, Ambassador Yuri Tamrin. Ambassador Tamrin would like to take this opportunity to register his deep concerns about current developments in Europe regarding Ukraine. Big powers, please cooperate more with each other. We believe the conflict between Russia and the West will endanger the world. If you may, Madam Ambassador, I would like to follow up on his statement with a question that is Russia's view on Indonesia's position on Ukraine. Indonesia is one of the countries that voted in favor of the UN General Assembly on 27th of March 2014 that basically invalidates the 2014 Crimean referendum. How would Indonesian position on Ukraine implicate on Indonesia-Russia relations today?
Well, fortunately enough, until quite recently, that was not an issue in our relations, either Crimea or our relations with Ukraine, and we are grateful and appreciative for our Indonesian friends. Well, you know, for Crimea, it's another issue because we consider the issue of Crimea closed. Crimea will never go back to Ukraine because initially Crimea was a Russian territory and 90% of population of Crimea are Russians. It was given to Ukraine by our leader Khrushchev in 1956. But at that time, it didn't matter because we were one country. Crimea population always wanted to go back to Russia, and the referendum held in 2014 was the result of this intention and the will of the people to go back to Russia. You know, they say that the people in Crimea were forced by Russia to vote in favor of joining. How can you force 2 million people to vote in a certain way? It's impossible. So it was the will of the people of Crimea, and there was a referendum. If it's not democratic, then what is? It's a blatant example of double standards produced by the West. And if the West acknowledge the independence of Kosovo, where there were no referendum at all, you know, why they don't acknowledge the will of people of Crimea that held the referendum? It's double standards, of course. So that's end of story. Crimea will never go back to Ukraine, whoever or whatever says whatever. For our relations, you know, where is Indonesia? Where is Ukraine? We know that you are good friends with Ukraine. We're okay with that. You have the perfect right, the government of Indonesia, the people of Indonesia, to be friends with whoever you wish. We also want to be friends with Ukraine, but unfortunately, it's the West prevents actually that from happening, and hopefully, and I'm quite sure that this situation will not affect our relations with Indonesia. It's not an issue in our relations, I can assure you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think with that optimistic note, we conclude this talk at STUDIUM General, and spasiba vam большое. And thank you for all who asked questions and engaged in the discussion. I would like to return the floor to our MC, Adele, to close our event today.
Thank you, Ms. Christian. I would like to reiterate our utmost gratitude for Her Excellency, Lyudmila, and Mas Christian for our discussion today. We have talked about many things regarding cooperation between Indonesia and Russia, or even in the context of Indo-Pacific itself. It was such an interesting and refreshing discourse. There are plenty of questions and commentaries as well from our enthusiastic participants, but due to the time constraints, we ultimately have to end our discussion today. I would like to thank all the parties involved in the preparation, as well as the execution of this Studium Generale, while also apologize for any inadequacies that might take place. So goodbye, and see you in our next events and discussions.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you.
Sampai jumpa.
Sampai jumpa.